Ladies and gentlemen, it's our classic feature discussion. What? And it's our 28th that we've ever done, and it's a very special movie tonight, episode 28.3, where we're going to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark. And hi, my name is Jonathan Betzler. Oh, I forgot to put up my thingy, my little name tag. So sorry about that. So I'll turn off the music now that it's over. That worked. Excellent. Get you pumped up for our 28th classic, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I got some people with me tonight, my little cohorts. So I'm very excited about them. They more so than they are about me. So see, their lower thirds aren't working. So maybe it's just solidarity that. But here we go. I'll put mine up. Now you know my name. Now you know how to spell my name. And who am I starting with the introductions? Let's start with Drunk Davey first. Drunk Davey, how you doing? Welcome.
Good.
All right. Thanks for that. J Money, can you believe it's our 28th show?
I know. We're so old now. And what is that in dog years?
You know, it's a good question. I'm not sure.
All right, shout out to our fan audience. Anyone that tweets at me what that is in dog years, I'll mention you by name in the next broadcast.
Anyone? Because that might be more than you bargained for.
Yeah, maybe.
So anyway, we got Raiders of the Lost Ark tonight. We'll talk about that more in a second. The trivia on the podcast last time, the trivia was that it's next week's classic, meaning this week, is my favorite movie of all time. So that's a big secret. Now you know what my favorite movie of all time is, and I may have mentioned it in episode 18.3 when we did our top 5 Spielberg films. The other bit of trivia was that on Facebook you may have seen that the lead character is named after the producer's dog, and that's true in the sense that George Lucas's dog was named Indiana, and that's how Indiana Jones got his name, which they refer to in the third movie, The Last Crusade. Also, the other thing I wanted to say was that that dog used to sit in the seat next to George Lucas when he drove around Modesto, and that concept of this, shaggy dog sitting next to him was the inspiration for Davey.
Indy. The name.
No.
What?
Dog sitting next to him in the car was the inspiration for.
Oh, the dogs. I don't know. What?
Come on, J Money.
Shaggy Dog, the movie.
Chewbacca, guys, come on.
Oh.
You said Shaggy Dog.
Use your imagination. So this is our schedule for the evening. We are in the third part of the schedule, the Raiders of the Lost Ark section. Check out our videos that we've already done about The Nice Guys, which was our new release of the evening. Indie Spotlight was our My Week with Marilyn discussion, which went on a little longer than I would have liked, but it was fairly in-depth, wouldn't you guys say?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, he says. For sure. And Raiders of the Lost Ark is now, and we got a full hour to talk about it, so hopefully we won't be late at the end. And coming out of 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific is the increasingly popular Sound Off, our freeform section. Davey's going to whine about one thing or another. And I have a top 5, which is top 5 Harrison Ford movies. That's what these guys requested I do, top 5 Harrison Ford movies, and that's coming up in the Sound Off, as well as we're going to talk about some movies that, some 1990 movies that came up in our discussions, especially our 1990 review show, that I hadn't seen and have since watched, for discussion. So some brief discussions about those movies, more 1990 stuff coming up in the Sound Off. Okay. So with that in mind, let's talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark. How to describe Raiders of the Lost Ark. Globe-trotting archaeologist Indiana Jones is sent to Egypt to see if he can thwart the Nazis in search in their search for the famed Ark of the Covenant. Oh, I did something wrong here. The chest that supposedly contains the holy remains of the stone tablet of the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. I really messed that up, trying to do two things at once, and I get burned. Maybe someone else should read these summaries once in a while, but maybe not after you guys get your lower thirds back. See, you can't even see their names. You don't even know who they are. That's Jay Money. That's Dave Joseph.
I don't know who I am.
You barely know who you are. So all right. So we're gonna start doing opening thoughts. Obviously, it's my favorite film of all time. So I can go first in that regard. I've already revealed that. I actually think it's perfect in what it wants to be, and we'll probably dig that up a little bit more. Who goes first? Otherwise, let's start with Jay Money. Opening thoughts.
All right. Well, I mean, I love this movie too, but it's kind of unfair. I mean, it's unfair to ask me. It's unfair to probably ask you, and also probably Davey Joe, what we think about this movie, because we are just of a certain ilk and generation that I think will probably respond very positively about this movie.
Yeah, but I'm going to try and make that argument that I think I don't disagree, but I mean, like, I'm going to try to make the argument that I think it defies even that. You know what I mean? Like, my dad liked the movie too, and I think younger generations, like, I have a friend who has kids, and she recently showed them, and like, I think it continues to do well in that way. I shouldn't really.
I hope so.
Well, we'll dig into that. Davey Joe, you're not a fan, as I recall, right?
What? No, I love this movie. No, I love the movie.
Would it place in your all-time list?
Yeah, definitely. I maybe not top 10, but it's I basically what I'm looking for is a legitimate criticism of this film. I can't even think of a negative to talk about.
I mean, I can't either, but I mean, I do think that strangely there are things that I think it gets sometimes undervalued from the critical mass. I'm talking about the really like esoteric scholars down there, the J Money types.
That's me.
And I mean, like, and I hear you saying, J Money, about like our age groups and stuff like that. And this movie, it's my favorite. I'm not calling it the best film ever made. Like, that I'm reserving that for the Citizen Kanes of the world. But I do. It's my favorite because it inspired me to want to do this for a living. A lot of films did, but I mean, like, this probably was the first one to get me excited. But even looking at it from a critical eye, I think it works so well, and we'll dig into that in a second. Let me tell you about the screening that we had, though, of it. It was September 13th of last year. It was one of those New Jersey screenings. Obviously, everyone enjoyed the film, but I will say they were less passionate about it than I am. And it was a mostly female group, so take that for what it's worth. Sometimes I wonder if it's too memorable. That when we were watching it, it doesn't have as much of the impact and awe because it's going to happen. And it's also embedded in our culture to some degree. So it's hard to appreciate how special it is, I think, when so many elements of it have made their way into pop culture. So the first thing I want to talk about as far as this is concerned is editing. I think that, if there's one thing that makes this movie special, it's the editing. Sometimes we talk about two different kinds of editing. We talk about the editing that shapes the overall story, something that, for example, The Big Short was really strong at. And writing that down, Davey Joe, come on.
Got it.
And then we talk about like with in-scene editing, like the shot-to-shot transitions, something that Mad Max was really strong at. So this is strong at both. It's extremely taut. It's pacing, it's timing, and balancing between comedy and action. Take note, Shane Black, who directed The Nice Guys, our early movie of the evening. Shot selection, and also something we don't talk about that much, the dissemination of information. Like, the way things come out and how they come out at certain periods of time. That's part of like the Big Short thing we're talking about, and how the editor reworks the story. I mean, like, I think it's very careful, and I think we don't talk about editing that much. It's sort of an invisible art, but I think it's the secret to the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, where are you guys on that, Davey?
I mean, I can't disagree with anything that you said. And you know what? I'll go a step further and say that Harrison Ford delivers a performance here that I mean, you just don't get larger than life kind of performances like that where I think today everybody's kind of focused on being sort of hyper realistic, and he was kind of in the old style, just larger than life, and had a great presence, and he wasn't afraid to be funny.
But I mean, like, I don't think that was, you say hyper realistic, but I mean, like, I think of hyper realistic, I think of like, Terry Gilliam performances in Terry Gilliam films. So maybe I'm not sure that's the word you're looking for. I don't think he was ever disingenuous. You know what I mean?
No, not disingenuous, but I definitely think that there's a kind of a classic feel to it. I mean, I often wonder if
Well, it is based on the serials, of the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Sure, it's just kind of like what I said. I think I said this in our very first episode ever. If Humphrey Bogart was around today, would people appreciate him? And I don't think that they would, and I think that that's a shame. I just think that this is that kind of performance. It's awesome. It's just like something you don't see.
We were talking about editing, so you sort of jumped it a little bit. But I mean, like, I talked about Harrison Ford's performance a little bit in episode 18.4, our sound off, where I did a top 5 Spielberg films. J Money, I guess you can talk about the performance. I feel like we've talked about it plenty, but do you have anything on the editing?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would have gone back to the editing anyway. I did not get a chance to rewatch this before our broadcast, which honestly I really wanted to, and I'm kind of sad I didn't get a chance to. But I did see it in the last 5 years, and when I saw it the last time, I was surprised.
You saw the musical the last 5 years?
I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark from the last 5 years. I watched it after Crystal Skull, I guess. Yeah, let me say that. Like after going to see Crystal...
rewash the palette? You wanted to rewash the palette?
I needed to like heal myself. After Crystal Skull, I was like, I need to reconnect with the better. But going back to the editing for a second, I was surprised at exactly what you're saying. It's very taut. It's a very quick-paced and yet entirely understandable, entirely readable movie. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen, but it's all composed so well, and a lot of that has to do with the quick editing, I think, in a lot of ways. But I mean, like we talked about quick, but it's not over quick from an MTV point of view. You know what I mean? I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm surprised at how well it held up. I mean, it seems like it still holds up very well to the kind of pace that we're all used to, and I think that says something.
I completely agree, and I think it's really important to note that because not a lot of 1981 films. Not that there were a lot of action films from 1981. And you know what? I don't know if Star Wars, the 1977 Star Wars, holds up the same way. No, I think Star Wars is actually a really good story and a really great script, and it's iconic in a lot of ways. But I mean, Star Wars. I'm talking about 1977. Empire is a whole different animal. But I mean, the original Star Wars is a little clunky in parts. It's poorly directed, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But Raiders, look, it's not trying to have the depth that a lot of these other films, do. But it was the Best Picture nominee, and deservedly so. I obviously would have voted for it. Chariots of Fire beat it, which is one of the worst Best Picture winners in my IMHO. So, and I don't know if you guys remember, this is Alfred Molina, a young Alfred Molina. I don't know if you guys knew that. Did you know that, Davey?
I didn't. I didn't put that together.
So. Spielberg casting, some special actors that we'd hear from much later, which brings us to Spielberg, I think. Look, I think he redefined the way we think about action scenes, and quite frankly, I think we need to go back to this style, not necessarily the old style of the serial action scenes. There's a secret, I think, to the way Spielberg does these action scenes that he perfected in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and again in Last Crusade. Not as much Temple of Doom. But it's something like Michael Bay and a lot of action directors of the time create action with chaos. It's quicker cutting, and by confusing the audience, the entropy increases. And they manage to hide things to some degree. I imagine there's a lot of films you slow down, it doesn't have the same sort of impact. And also, sound is a big part of what Michael Bay does. Louder, more explosions. It's chaos and confusion. Secret to effective action scenes is geography and off-screen space, and they're connected. And I say that in the sense that he's always showing you where things are in relation to each other. I think about the gotta find a good picture of it, but the preeminent example is the truck chase, and I was saving that photo for later for some reason, but I can't remember why. But you're always aware where the truck is in relation to the car, in relation to the horse, in relation to the people in the back of the truck. Constantly aware of where everything is in relation to everything else, and it heightens the tension, and it's more exciting, and it's not cut so fast where it confuses you. You're involved. It's the Spielberg "you are there" technique, and I can't understate how important it is and how effective it is in terms of action scenes. And I feel like younger audiences need to watch this film and see how much more exciting it is than something like Transformers. So I went on a little bit there. I've got more on the direction. J Money, I gave David Joe first shot last time. Do you have anything on these action scenes?
JB, I actually just have a quick question for you.
9 inches.
That's not a quick question. That's a gross question.
What's your quick question?
I feel like I've read before that when this came out, people really actually noticed how fast-paced it was, and it set almost a new standard in terms of the speed, in terms of how it was edited. Do you know anything about this?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that. I mean, I would imagine that's somewhat true, but I mean, to me, it feels like timed just right.
Well, no, I mean, I think that we're also used to it, and we also grew up with it in a way. But I think that I remember reading criticism of it even from the time where it was talking about like how it seemed almost too much. And it's funny because I mean, obviously, it holds up very well at this point because we're also accustomed to that sort of like pace.
Well, I mean, like let's put it this way: 1981 is also when MTV started, and that's when things got faster and faster. So it's certainly not as fast as the music video sensibility that would start to take over the decade. So I think that I can see how in early 1981, I think it was late May, it came out, almost 35 years to the day, actually.
Wow.
So I can see where that might confuse some critics, but I mean, in terms of what's right for the story, I think it works. Davy Joe, anything on the action scenes?
I mean, they're some of the most memorable action scenes of my youth. I think that.
A lot of people also love the ostrich chase from Swiss Family Robinson that we talked about last week or last time. I mean, when they were a kid, they saw it, they loved it. That doesn't hold up.
Well, no, it doesn't hold up. I think that just the way that this just starts right from the beginning. When he's going through all the booby traps, and at the end he's got to make a hasty retreat. Even today you don't see anything like that. I mean, there are similar attempts, but nothing really nails it like that does. I mean that stuff is. I mean that's why this movie is, to me, it's the best of the series.
Well, I'm obviously not to disagree with that. The other thing that I think it does really successfully is tone. In the sense that, I mean, another reason why it's my favorite movie is it has everything. I mean, like, I really think it's full. I mean, we just talked about the action scenes in it, so it's got the excitement, but it's got humor. It's got romance. It's got a little bit of drama even, because there's a time when it's a classic. We assume you've all seen at this point. He thinks Marion's gone at one point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you talked about his performance. He handles that as an actor. He handles that really, really well. The scene where he's about to blow up the Ark. There's some drama. There's some real drama, and it's grounded, which makes the action more important. You know what I mean? Because there's stakes. Which leads us to talk about the screenplay, which we will. I also want to acknowledge that I talked a little bit about shot selection, but just Spielberg from a camera angle point of view it does some really awesome things in this movie. I almost feel like every choice is spot on, but there's tons of like great, just it's greatly edited. It's well edited, but just single shots. You know what I mean? Like the pieces of the puzzle that the editor uses are so well done. And also in keeping with this, I talked about the excitement, the humor, the romance, but also the homage. There's this nostalgia factor, without going too into that, but the homage to the serials is ever present in a really fun way. So, all these things, coexist in this movie, which is why I think that's really important. Do you guys have anything on direction before I move on to talk about the screenplay, Davey?
Well, it's kind of getting at what you were just talking about, how it balances action, adventure, comedy, romance, and don't forget horror. I don't know
What's your favorite word?
I don't know that another movie does that as well ever.
And that's my point. That's why I think it's a justifiable favorite movie of all time.
Oh, it's completely justifiable. I'm gonna let you have this one.
Thanks, G-Money.
I think it's interesting because nostalgia is obviously a really large part of the formation of this movie, and yet it stands so far away from the idea of parody, and that's something that's actually really unique, especially I think at this point. I think that if somebody approached the same idea for the generation of this movie, it would be a much different movie now. I think that this movie was an homage in the purest sense, and you don't necessarily see an uncynical approach like that as much, which is probably part of the reason it's survived as long as it has.
I really love that use of that word, uncynical. I think that's a really good point here. And that leads us to the screenplay. Look, AFI called Indiana Jones the second greatest hero of all time. In their list of heroes and villains. We talked about at one of the early sound-offs, as I recall, when we answered a Twitter question. Do you guys remember who was number one?
Was it?
Oh, crap.
Was it
Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah.
Was number one. Look, the screenplay, we talked about the balance of tone, which is partially screenplay, but again, that's something the director has to achieve on set. It's one thing to put it on the page. It's easier to put on the page. It's harder to execute. So I give that to Spielberg. But the screenplay, co-written by Lucas, Philip Kaufman, Lawrence Kasdan, all sort of contributed to this. The screenplay itself, give to Kaufman and Kasdan. So detailed. And again, we talked about the information, like the way these the callbacks with the snake thing and the way it's established early on, it's perfect structurally. You know what I mean? In that regard, and it's infused with humor, and it manages to have some of this depth in it too. We talked a little. I think about the scene with Belloc and Indy in the cafe. Right here, where he talks about it being a radio to God. It does not. It's not making fun of this these archaeological artifacts or the religious implications. It's not religious in any way. It's not reverent per se, but it's not disrespectful either. You know what I mean? So it has an extra bit of weight. And again, it's about stakes. I think in spite of its action elements, that get due credit to Steven Spielberg, it's a great screenplay as well, and one that can be learned from, because of all the elements that coexist, to reuse a word. J Money, your turn.
Yeah, I think that it lacks a layer of cheese which is surprising because I guess I would say that if modern audiences tackled this now, there'd be a certain self-awareness and almost cheesiness to it that's intentional. This movie is so genuine in its approach that I think that's again why it has the longevity it does. I think that you're talking about the way that it handles a religious aspect. That's a really hard thing to combine into a movie that has all these other factors you're talking about, and yet it completely works without question. Never gets in the way, never bogs down the story, and never confuses kind of the overall point of the story. So,
and I think the movie's so iconic. We take its structure and craft for granted. That's why I think it needs to reinvestigate it. I think it needs to be studied in film schools. If I taught a class, I would show it not just not just to get somebody excited about it, but also it has everything that you'd want in a movie. It's a perfect example of how to make a movie.
And it's so tight. If someone tried to pull off something like this, it would be 2.5 hours today.
well,
just
that's exactly why I started. That's why I started with the editing as our
Yeah.
time goes up. I think that's crucial. And Michael Kahn has been K-A-H-N, I speak fast sometimes. Has been Spielberg's editor forever. And that's your, right-hand person in for most of the movie. So I wanted to talk about cinematography, but I don't think I've got time. I also want to not be late again, so I'm just going to jump to talk about the score because that's why. And now that's the march. That's the Raiders March, and obviously that's iconic. But also don't forget the Marion's theme. Mm-hmm. Super romantic, beautiful score. Like, everything's iconic about this score. But it also has so many different cues, types of cues. It's got the romantic cues with Marion. It's got this, exciting cues with the march. This religious aspect, that the map room cue, which is the cue that plays over the picture I've got up right now, is eerie and but also like exciting because this is a victory. This moment is a victory for him. It combines those elements. Now, I've often talked about my favorite scores of all time, and I talk about E.T. Just having that extra emotional punch in terms of the overall score. But there's so many cues in this score, and John Williams has 50 Oscar nominations now. Holy cow! Like, Jesus, really? And he's getting an AFI Achievement Award this year. If he didn't already, I can't remember if it happened or not. But he's the first composer to get an AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. And so many of his scores are iconic, but there's some backlash because of that. I think that there is obviously a lot of classical music influence and what have you, but it was right for the movies. You know what I mean? Like, it's too good not to acknowledge. We talked about him a little bit during Missouri Breaks because how uniconic that was. Anything on the score? What's that?
I said it was iconic from Missouri Breaks. I mean, it stuck out as a soundtrack, certainly.
Anything on the score, guys?
It's incredible.
Yeah, I want to get back to the idea of eeriness, actually, because I think that really is a large part of what draws me into the score. I mean, especially that map room scene. That whole theme that plays throughout that starts sort of with the low flutes kind of coming in slowly. There's a quality that picks up on the idea of the environment with the wind. There was something that seems almost inherently like desert-like to me about it, but it also brings in a sense of this. I mean, to Davy Joe's point, a little bit of horror, which I think is really important. I mean, I think it's a really interesting aspect to how he kind of counterpointed all the fun, action-y stuff that happens in this movie otherwise. It just, just covers a lot of different personalities, and I think that's really worth noting.
I do want to move on, but I had a note here to talk about favorite scenes, and I think for our my favorite movie, we might as well. Davey, do you have a favorite scene from this movie?
Yeah, it's early on with the boulder.
The opening chase thing. Cool. Jay Money.
Man, the map room scene, it always gives me goosebumps. That's one of the scenes that definitely always stands out to me. I happen to really like the way that the end wraps up. I happen to really like the scene on the aviator field. I mean, there's a lot of different things that really stand out to me.
And I'm going to go, map room is my second, but I'm going to go with the truck chase, the aforementioned truck chase. I realized this is what I was saving the picture for. I think it is the prototypical action scene. And this stunt where he, I'm trying to remember if you guys, our very second classic was Stagecoach, which used the very same stunt. This is, a Yakima Canutt stunt from the 30s that they, obviously had with horses in Stagecoach, not a truck, but, the same idea. But it still works in this with this quote unquote modern audience. I think, I think top to bottom, it's the excitement of the scene never ceases. I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, no, I agree, definitely.
Okay, so let's see if I got the right picture up. It's because we're going to move on to the Classic Feature Showdown. All right, so for our newbies, basically we've got brackets like the NCAA tournament. And in each episode, one movie goes against another movie in one of these fun little brackets. At least they're fun to me. One of everyone's favorite things is hearing Davey read the rules. And I told him last time that he did a pretty bad job. So this time he's got his glasses on. I'm gonna cut to him with his glasses on because he's ready now. He looks like a total dork. And it's time. It's time for him to read the rules, and we'll see if he can jazz it up a little bit. Davey Joe.
All right, the seating criteria varies from bracket to bracket. Films are shown at JB-hosted screenings, and they need to be 15 years or older. Voters are eligible if they see both films within a 12-month period. Voters must see both films in JB's presence. JB is ineligible to vote unless the vote counts. He can break ties.
Unless the vote counts. That was, yeah. Come on, I need you to have some energy, and you're just reading. I mean, like, put some emphasis on some of these things, you know?
I dig it, man.
I thought that was really good. I'm going to say...
Jazzing it up, man.
Audience, what do you think? What do you audience members think? Was that really good? He can do better. I've seen him do better. Episode 26.3, Goodfellas, he did a better job there. 25.3 was one of his best ones. I don't remember what that was off the top of my head, but
and I have a top 5 Davy Joe reading the criteria list.
I'm gonna look into that. Anyway, all right. So here's the bracket. We're doing the Hollywood Reporter a year or two ago put out a list of their 100. They did a poll of Hollywood insiders, industry people that work, in Hollywood here. And they polled them their favorite films of all time, and they listed the top 100. We took the top 64, turned them into a bracket. Here's how the seeds turned out. We got two. We got round one and round two here. So if you remember that top one, that 5-12 matchup, we talked about that in episode 7. Titanic in episode 7 was our indie. And if you look it up on YouTube, you'll see it's where we talk about Child 44. So it was April. And Titanic was our indie, and It's a Wonderful Life went up against It's a Wonderful Life.
Wait, our classic, right? You mean our classic?
In our well, we didn't separate them then.
Yeah,
oh,
that's right.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
So it's part of the Child 44 episode. So anyway, and so if you watch that, go back and watch that episode, you will see that It's a Wonderful Life defeated Titanic there. And not in any episode separate from you guys or before we even started this show, Raiders of the Lost Ark defeated All About Eve. So both of the higher seeds advanced, and that's a tough one actually. Raiders of the Lost Ark against All About Eve. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I wasn't convinced that was gonna happen, but that was a close vote. Do you guys, before I go to round two, I know you guys agree with It's a Wonderful Life over Titanic. Does anyone want to say All About Eve here? Should have beaten Raiders of the Lost Ark?
No, All About Eve's a great movie, but no.
J Money?
I still haven't seen it, so disqualified.
Oh, All About Eve? Oh, I'll have to add that to your list of movies.
I know.
Although, I guess since we haven't reviewed it on the show, maybe we should wait. Anyway, so this is what round two looks like. And that's what we're going up against here. Double round, I guess. Look at that. Most of us call it second round, but who cares? It's cool.
Well, it's 2 rounds. Double round.
Anyway, what picture did I want to pull up here? Okay, so it's Raiders of the Lost Ark against It's a Wonderful Life. Now it's a 4-5 seed, which is as close as you can get in the second round. Those of you that follow basketball know that. And so it was up. Now this was determined already by our viewing audience, by the audience at the screening on September 13th, 2015. So we have a winner, but I'm curious as to where these guys are. Davey, I'm going to let you vote first. It's a Wonderful Life.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. No question.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there's no question. Why is that?
I mean, It's a Wonderful Life is a good movie. It's fine. But come on. Raiders of the Lost Ark all the way.
Can you come up with a better argument than come on?
Well, I don't want to kind of go into all the things that I've said about already. And I also don't want to necessarily criticize It's a Wonderful Life, but to me, I look at Raiders of the Lost Ark as kind of flawless and sort of a, I don't want to say miraculous, but I mean just the fact that it is what it is in the amount of time that it does it. It's pretty incredible. So I don't think this is even close.
Are you suggesting that It's a Wonderful Life is flawed?
Yeah. I mean, it's flawed. It's not perfect like this. I mean, I haven't seen it recently enough to I don't really want to get into it, but I know that it's not. I don't view it with the same reverence as I do.
You mean you didn't rewatch it for this episode like you were supposed to?
I did not. No.
J Money, what would you vote?
Man, I've been thinking about this one all week, or at least since whenever I found out what the bracket matchup would be. And I've gone back.
It's actually probably months because it's
been on the
list.
months ago.
Yeah. I thought I've gone back and forth on it a lot. In the end, I'm gonna actually go with It's a Wonderful Life. I think that I ended up picking that one because I think ultimately I draw more from it at this point. I don't know if I could say that. Like, obviously I couldn't have said that when I was like, I don't know, 8 and totally in love with Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I think, myself at this point will probably take a little bit more away from It's a Wonderful Life in that viewing than I will from Raiders. As much as I love Raiders, obviously I have nothing bad to say about Raiders. Absolutely not a criticism of Raiders in any way whatsoever. It's just that I think I respond more to It's a Wonderful Life at this point.
Do you mean from an emotional perspective, like the emotional engagement level?
But not just an emotional perspective. Also, just from the movie making of it. I understand that they're very different movies, and you get different things out of them in a lot of ways. But I think that I don't know. I think that I really enjoy watching Raiders. I think that It's a Wonderful Life fascinates me a little bit more. Perhaps that's a way of putting it in terms of a movie. So maybe that's too vague for you, but I'm trying to think about how.
Davey, how do you feel about this?
I mean, he can be wrong. That's fine. It's.
I mean, Davey Joe can hate Christmas as much as he wants. It's fine, but.
Well, oddly enough, our Christmas episodes are some of the worst we've ever done. So
Yeah.
maybe I guess
Christmas
not.
just hates us. It's not us hating Christmas.
I see.
Yeah, both those things could be true. Both those things could be true.
They can just hate each other. Anyway.
They're both movies about the same thing at the end of the day. They're both weirdly religious movies. So maybe it's just pick whichever way you want to go.
I'm gonna have to stew on that one before I respond to that. I think that's a sound-off discussion debate there. So the reactions from the winner based on the audience on September 13th. I obviously would have voted for Raiders just because it's my favorite movie of all time, but I love It's a Wonderful Life. So if it were just the three of us, Raiders would win.
Yeah.
But
Oh my God.
September 13th audience said It's a Wonderful Life. It was an emotional engagement issue. You know what I mean? Like when we had screened that, the Christmas before, people were in tears. And both films have a lasting impact. And obviously, again, this is as close as you're gonna get 4 or 5 matchup in the second round. So it's supposed to be a really tough call. It's not for me just because I've got a pre-existing list. But I think that it didn't surprise me that much. I was hoping. I mean, like, I was hoping you were surprised. I was hoping it wouldn't lose, but it did. And I wasn't super surprised. So anyway, Davey Joe, what's your reaction?
I'm just disappointed in this.
I mean, Davey Joe has no heart, so he doesn't necessarily respond to these emotional things.
I mean, haven't we always talked about you as the heartless one?
This is true, and yet here I am defending It's a Wonderful Life. So clearly,
right.
It's a Wonderful Life's a great movie. It's just not. It's not Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just not.
This is definitely true. It is definitely not Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I think he means it's not as good, J Money.
Oh, is that what he means? I'm telling you, they're both about, weird religious things. They're both about these supernatural sort of religious things coming down to earth. So
that's vague at best.
Not so much.
Davy Joe.
I know, man.
Time.
You got to start inviting different people to these things. What's going on with this? they're voting wrong.
Wow, getting the fan vote.
With that said, I want to point everyone that's watching to episode 23.3, when Oklahoma went up against Purple Rain, and the excitement that Davy Joe had when the results came in.
That's true.
Because he was so convinced that what he wanted to happen would not happen. So anyway, Davy Joe, it's time for your recap.
All right. So we got here. We got Star Wars, The Big Short, Mad Max, Empire Strikes Back, Stagecoach, E.T., Goodfellas, Titanic, All About Eve, Oklahoma, Purple Rain.
That's pretty good.
And did you say It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh, good point. It's a Wonderful Life.
He tried to hide it off. He tried to bury the lead on that one.
So the whole point of this recap is we were hearing from you Twitter people that you were losing track of the films that we refer to offhand. So now, if you were like, oh, what was that movie they mentioned?
It's
this
because
gives you a
they're not
chance to
paying
write it down
attention.
at the end of the show. What's that?
It's
Davey?
because they're not paying attention.
No, I mean I can see how it's hard to remember.
It's a joke
we have
because I can't even do it.
Short, Mad Max.
I'm on the show and I can't do it.
I mean, why start now?
That doesn't surprise me though. That's a whole different ball of wax. Speaking of balls of wax, a whole different ball of wax is coming up in about 12 minutes. It's our Sound Off, our freeform segment that very few people understand but everybody loves. We're just going to talk about junk related to movies. It's kind of exciting. Davey's going to whine about something. I've got a top 5 Harrison Ford films coming up that you are definitely going to want to check out. What else is happening? Oh, we got our second run where we talk about movies that one of us hasn't seen. That we talked about at one show, and then it's like, oh, I haven't seen that. So then we bring it back and rediscuss it. That's happening in the Sound Off. We might even have a surprise Where's LaBeouf segment. What? Everybody's like, what? That's my segment, man.
That's crazy.
So anyway, that's coming up. Sound Off, freeform, which is jive in a very structured way, coming up in about 11 minutes now. Thanks for tuning in, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Our next classic. I almost forgot my tidbit for the next classic is it is one of the few films to win an acting Oscar for a wordless performance. That's coming up next time. Davey's impressed with this little tidbit. We'll see if he's impressed with the movie next time, which is June 6th, 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock Eastern. Meantime, Sound Off, the end of our evening, coming up in 11 minutes.